So good morning, happy November. Wasn't it great to get an extra hour of sleep? I always like that, it's like a little gift, you know. So as I have been kind of working on today's talk in my mind, I thought quite a bit about what Reverend Maureen said last week, one part of her talk, when she said that we are all made of star stuff. You know, people just say that, but she went ahead and explained it, that, you know, we're not just talking in a metaphysical way. She meant it as a cold, hard fact. That, you know, she explained how a supernova explodes, and then all of these chemical elements scatter across the universe and get recycled into worlds like planet Earth and eventually end up in our bodies. It's pretty amazing when you think about it this way. There's a idea that substance comes from space. And I actually went, after her talk, I went and looked up the NASA website, and they have, it's good, you know, it's not that technical because they have a whole educational page where you can choose. I want to know what a second grader needs to know, or I want to know what a sixth grader needs to know.
That was great.
It was good. You could get your own, you know, grade level explanation or go as deeply as you want. And as I was thinking about the scientific story of how things came to be, I was also thinking about this biblical story about how things came to be, you know, the story of creation in Genesis. And as I thought about it, I thought, well, you know, if you were really used your imagination, you could kind of see a little bit of similarity between the two. If you imagine that the biblical story was written a long time ago, before they had thought of telescopes or NASA or had these ideas, the authors still were able to come up with or intuit a story that had a sequence of things happening. So, of course, the one difference between the two is that NASA doesn't start by saying God created it all. It's more of a physical approach. But in the Bible, it's somewhat logical. You know, it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth, and then it goes on with this step-by-step process, explaining how water is separated from the land, and the day and the night got separated from each other. And then how the plants and animals and finally the humans came into being. So I do not take the story of Genesis literally. I just want to say that. But I did think it was fairly orderly. It did describe a step-by-step process. And what I noticed in thinking about it is that both stories, the scientific story and the biblical story, talk about how we came into being, how the earth came to be. And how things evolved is very interesting to me. There's a TV show called How Things Are Made. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it has episodes where you know, they show you what's going on inside a factory. How do they make bicycles? How do they make glad wrap? How do they make shoes? And so I like watching it. I haven't watched that much lately because during the pandemic I kind of watched a lot. But it's interesting, you know, and it's not boring. It's kind of nice. And things are made in a process. There's usually a sequence. First you do this, then you do that. Then comes what's next. You know, it's almost like according to a recipe or a plan that is based always on what we call natural laws. For instance, if you bake a cake, First, you mix the ingredients together. Then, you put it in a pan and bake it. You can't bake the ingredients first. You can't bake the eggs and then expect to be able to mix it in a bowl and come up with a cake. It doesn't work that way. Life is not as random as we sometimes say it is. You know, it's systematic, it really is. So how you make a cake or anything else is actually in harmony with these natural laws. And that's the how. But what about the why? Why you make a cake is totally up to you. You know, is it a birthday cake or is it a cheesecake? Whatever. You can decide to do it or not to do it. You decide why. So whether we think that a being named God made the first man, Adam, out of the dust of the ground and his wife, Eve, out of his rib, which I don't believe, or whether we think we evolved over the millennia from a supernova, which is maybe getting closer, I don't know, or whether we hold some totally other idea about how life began, all of these ideas are about how it happened. So that brings us to the question of why. Why did it start? Why are we here? And you know, for that matter, where are we? So I'm just going to tell you my opinion. And it's not an original opinion. I didn't make it up, but I do agree with it. And as you know, we've been studying in our class The Creative Process in the Individual, which is a book by Thomas Trower that greatly influenced what we believe here at our center. Now he said, the why. He said that everything is a result of the self-contemplation of spirit. And that now, we humans are also in a position to engage in our individual version of this self-contemplation of spirit, and that as we do this, we too are going to experience or are experiencing firsthand the creative process as our process. Remember I said there's a how, a process? Well, this creative process that we're talking about is the result of the self-contemplation of spirit. And that's why I called my talk today Centered in the Center. Because the all-originating spirit, if you imagine it, pure spirit, has to be infinite as well as eternal. And so being infinite, it must have an infinite number of centers, right? Mm-hmm. And each of us, since we are an individualization of spirit, you know, and to try to visualize it, think of the ocean, a drop in the ocean. This drop in the ocean has the qualities, the aspects, the possibilities of the ocean, and yet it's not the whole ocean, it's only a drop. So we don't walk around saying we're God. We walk around saying, oh, I am an individualization of spirit. I am a spiritual being having a human experience. So each of us is a unique center in the infinite. We're not drops of water sharing the properties of the ocean. We are each centers of consciousness sharing the properties of that all-originating consciousness. You could call it spirit or God. So the qualities of spirit, which include life, light, love, power, peace, beauty, joy, and the possibilities. It also includes the possibilities of making choices and setting things into motion with our thoughts, feelings, and actions. All of these capacities do reside in us, because we're made of spirit. So back in 1927, when our movement, religious science, was still new, our founder, Ernest Holmes, set out what we call a declaration of principles. And the very first one says, we believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one, indestructible, absolute and self-existent cause. Self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. So, in saying this, Holmes was also agreeing with Thomas Troward, who had written that since we recognize that we are conscious, and since we feel alive, it should help us realize that in the beginning, although there was no beginning, because we're always at the beginning, you think of an infinite, eternal beingness. Spirit, if you can imagine a point when there was nothing but spirit, it must have had a feeling of being alive all over. Infinite aliveness. But Troward asked, how could spirit recognize this, its own aliveness, if it was, think of just floating in a vacuum, not what we believe. But he says it had to be a necessity for there to be something else. Just as if you want to see something, if you want to see a painting or really get a good look at everything, you can't have it this close to your eyes and see anything, right? You have to step back. There has to be a field of vision, a contrast. So Troward says that something else that enables spirit to be conscious of its own livingness is actually substance, the manifest universe. And that's basically what Holmes said too, that the body of God, the manifest universe, is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. So when I was reading it, I thought, you probably have heard the saying, I think, therefore I am. Have you ever heard people say that? So it comes from the philosopher Descartes. And I looked at it, I'm like, whoa, is that kind of what we're saying? And I was interested because originally he didn't say, I think, therefore I am. He said, I think, I am. Spontaneously, together. I think, I am. And that's what we're talking about when we say spirit created matter. It's like, I'm alive, I am. They're hand in hand. They're not really a process. And this is the why. The why is it's spontaneous, eternal, infinite, always ongoing, this beingness. So given what we believe, then the answer to why life happened must be that life, the universe, matter itself, all of universal substance is projected by universal spirit out of its feeling of aliveness. So what is this feeling of aliveness but the highest form of love? Troward and Holmes both claim that this self-contemplation of spirit, this self-awareness of spirit, brings forth everything through the action, the how of the creative process. So we see the creative process in our life also. Just by discovering we can think and that our thoughts, realizing that our thoughts do affect our feelings, our actions, and our experiences. As we become more and more conscious and self-aware, then we ask these questions, why and how. So this is a little bit of an aside, but not exactly. If you could imagine a being, maybe a person, or that didn't have any way to hear sounds or even feel the vibration of sounds at all, could that being appreciate music? No, right? So then why do we have these faculties? Why do we have our senses? What does that mean we should be doing? Why do we have these abilities? I believe that is to enable us to be aware, to experience, to be able to discern and appreciate life in so many of its forms and ways, through sound and sight and feeling and vibration, and through our emotional capacity for love, all kinds of emotions, not just the happy ones. We have senses, and we have amazing ability, that people refer to as intuition or imagination. I believe we've evolved these abilities because they enable us to explore the universe, to engage with the universe, and to bring activity into life itself through our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. This is the role that we play in the universe. We do it all the time. It's what we are. We're consciously setting life into motion. Really, I think, why we do it unconsciously as well as consciously. And we often talk about awakening to our abilities, awakening to our spiritual magnificence. I think it is awakening to our ability to use the creative process, use the sequence of all the hows, how to do this, how to do that, in a conscious way. So I believe now it's actually time for us to wake up and to consciously declare the good that we wish to see in our lives and in the world, and to begin to accept that we are the ones who have to make decisions about what we want to see happening. So what we call God, or the all-originating spirit, is, you could say, benign, loving, beneficial, but it's not actively deciding what is going to happen in our world today, or what is going to happen in our lives today. That is now our role. And we have a duty, I believe we have a duty to stay as positive as we can, to live in harmony with life, with natural laws, and not to fall into the trap of thinking and behaving in negative ways. I do it. It's not like I don't do it, I do it. So, and we have to constantly pull ourselves out of these holes that we fall into. Because consciously or unconsciously, we are using the creative process all the time. And Troward said we sometimes are using it in what he referred to as inverted or negative ways, like, going against the flow instead of with the flow. And he said that when we do that, We're setting into motion mayhem instead of joy. Problems, they pop up. And so these problems pop up and they can be reminders, oh, get back on course, right? It's just like when you're walking down a path, you get into the brambles and it's like, oh, wait, where am I? I need to watch where I'm stepping. I need to stay on this path that I have chosen. Because negative thinking, and a lot of it is just unconscious, but even so it can have an effect. On a very micro, tiny scale, it can result in personal unhappiness, illness, lack of resources, a lack of freedom. But then, let's remember that on the macro scale, and I'm talking about, as a group, our group thoughts, it can result in war, starvation, depression, even tyranny. We see these things on the news, and we see that when hate and fear have kind of, let's call it their heyday, then what happens? Something is set into motion, a manifestation of what I think of as reckless harm unfolds, just like a hurricane. And then people do come to their senses again, and it happens because over and over we see that the world settles back into peace. Peace is the natural, harmonious state. And so the truth, I believe, it is very good news that love really does make the world go round. That in a way you could say it's almost self-correcting. That when we flow in the direction of love, when we let our lives flow along in the direction of love, our lives unfold harmoniously. Although when we go against the flow, for whatever reason, things happen. We may hit rough spot after rough spot until we can once again become more harmonious. And that's what a lot of our spiritual practices do. They bring us back into our center, our feeling of being centered in love. I mean, the whole story of the life of Jesus of Nazareth was really to help us recognize the importance of love and faith, to trust in the truth. So what should we do when we feel challenged by life? The same thing as always. Remember to stay centered in the center of love. This is where you will find you are strongest. This is where you will find you are powerful, where you will have your wisdom at hand, be able to make those great decisions. The truth is there really is a power for good, that we really can use it as we choose. So just remember that your dreams and your desires really do matter. They matter a lot. So think about your personal dreams when you were a child, or that you may now have if you are a child. Children generally dream about their futures with an idea of how wonderful it's going to be, right? When you were little, you didn't dream that you were going to be broke or sick. No, you dreamed you were going to be a fireman or whatever, or travel the world. We need to trust life today just as truly and as faithfully as a child. Your dreams and your decisions have just as much power now as they ever did. It's never too late to make new choices or to recommit to something that maybe you once chose, but it kind of got faded into the background. So I just, in closing, I wanted to just give an example of the power of an idea. Because we usually talk about our individual ideas. But I want to just have you think for a moment about the talk that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave that we generally refer to as the I Have a Dream speech, in which he declared, now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. See, he was making a declaration. He had an idea, he announced it, he set that idea free. Now, he wasn't the only one who had this idea. It was a shared idea. And from him saying it, from other people saying it, this idea has rippled out through our whole culture. And while you could say, well, we're not quite there yet, we can also say, we've come a long way. It is in the process of manifestation. It is in the process. The how is happening because of the why. The why of a decision, a thought, a realization being put into, planted into the mind of really spirit itself, our shared mind. So dare to dream. Understand that thoughts do actually become things, not necessarily overnight, but sometimes overnight. We don't have to be famous like Dr. King in order to use the creative process. What we have to do is make decisions, declare it, and know that it belongs to you because you belong to the universe. You are centered in the center of love, and with love, all things are possible. So it is. Thank you.